I'd like to formally welcome everyone to our webinar, Proven Ways to Drive Up Contact Center Quality. I think it's going to be a fascinating webinar. We've got a lot of research that we've conducted, and just a little bit of introduction to everyone. Delighted to introduce to you Tom Vanderwell from Intelligentics. Welcome, Tom.
Welcome. It's great. Thanks for having me. Really glad to be here.
And it's lovely to have you back. Intelligentics, if people aren't familiar, is a customer satisfaction research and quality consultancy, though I think you do a number of things more than that, Tom.
Yes, we help companies to improve their QA process, as well as we're a third-party provider. The companies just hire us to do it, along with training, coaching as well, all of it customer-centric.
Excellent, and delighted to welcome back Derek Cochrane from ScoreBuddy. Welcome, Derek. And ScoreBuddy, people probably know you best as a sort of a way of, if you like, automating or moving away from spreadsheets for quality scoring, and the organization has grown quite quickly on the back of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're trying to provide an alternative to spreadsheets and some sort of a fairly flexible tool to meet a lot of different requirements depending on sector, and also to try and promote sort of transparency in terms of the QA process within the organization. So yeah, we've been getting a lot of people buying into that message. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, a bit of housekeeping. You can watch the replay a bit later on today, callcenterhelper.com recorded webinars. We're carrying out the chat room discussion today in our chat room. Here's the address, callcenterhelper.com/chat. We've got about 40 people logged into the chat room already. Very easy, just put in your first name, last name, and email. There are a number of benefits for being in there. The first one is that you can communicate with other people in the audience, but you can also download the webinar slides. Now, there is a lot of detail, in particular on Tom's slides. A lot of the words are quite small, so it'd probably be quite useful for reference material, getting that download. So just click on the link here. We will be having a quiz today. It's the first time we've experimented with this using Kahoot, which should be a bit of fun and reinforce some of the messages. So there's a link to that quiz on there, and you can do that quiz typically on your mobile phone, but you can also do it on the PC if you want to. So just follow that link through. It does appear in a separate window, so perhaps if you put the chat room on one side of your screen, the webinar slides on the other. And there is an added advantage that you can ask questions if you'd like to use hashtag question for a question or hashtag tip for a tip. We do have either a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates or an Amazon gift voucher for the best tip. In fact, and for the winner of the quiz, we'll also be doing another prize as well. So before we get going, what I want to do is just want to put up a quick poll, just take the pulse. And the question is, on average, how much would you say your advisors like your quality scoring program? So do they love it? Do they like it? Do they put up with it, or do they hate it? So be quite interesting to see, where is your quality scoring program with the advisors? Tom, any predictions on where you think the answer might come?
You know, I'm gonna go with put up with it being the #1 answer.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the. I think that's probably not a bad bet. Let's have a look at the results. Of 73% put up with it, 19% like it, 3% love it, and 5% hate it. So if you've answered like it or love it, would you like to put a couple of details in the chat room about perhaps why the advisors like it so much? It'd be interesting to see that research, and so I think that's going to be quite fascinating. So that's probably a good time now to move across to Tom. And Tom, I know you've done a lot of research, and I think you're going to go through an example of a project you've been through recently on quality. So perhaps, Tom, if you'd like to put the slides up on your screen.
All right, let me do that. One moment, please.
Ideas.
All right, bear with me while I get started here.
And while you're doing that, Tom, just a couple of bits of feedback on people who like it. Susan says our group likes it because they also score their calls themselves. and of input in how they're doing versus a supervisor's feedback. I think that's a fantastic thing. Drew said, I use ScoreBuddy and it works well. It does what we need it to do. And Laura says our advisors like it. They're familiar with it. There's only been a few changes over the years, not necessarily the most effective measure though. I've recently inviting team members to calibration satisfaction, so see it's utilized. So I guess keeping it consistent is possibly a key thing on there, though that's often a challenge. Tom, so we're going to take you through your ideas.
Absolutely. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here. I think that Derek and I agree on a lot of things, but one thing we would say with regard to today's webinar is most people don't connect their QA process to a good customer satisfaction survey or research process. And while QA can measure compliance with internal initiatives or branding and so on and so forth, where we see QA having the greatest impact on companies is when it is measuring the right stuff that is going to move behavior to the things that will drive customer satisfaction. So having a good customer satisfaction survey or research that links to the QA process, it can be very, very critical. So I'm going to give you an example from so Intelligentix, we have a research team working on all sorts of different customer-centered surveys and research for clients, and then we have our quality side. Let me give you an example. So it's the most common #1 driver of satisfaction among customer service callers is resolution. Resolve my call, and a buzzword, one call resolution, is oftentimes just thrown out there. Everybody knows it. But there's more to it than that, and your QA process can really help measure it in a lot of ways. I'm going to start with a slide that shows what we did is we took our clients' customers, and when we researched them, we asked them, how many contacts did it take for you to get your issue resolved? And then we looked at, of the people that answered 1 contact, 2 contacts, or 3 contacts and more, we looked at the percentage of those customers that were overall satisfied or very satisfied with that experience. And what you can see here is, yes, as we know, 1 contact is pretty good. We're up there in the mid-90s. And what we're comparing here is 2018 for the first half of 2019 for this particular company. And I want you to look at what happened with 2 contact satisfaction and 3 contact satisfaction in just 6 months' time. In other words, customer expectation was going up extremely, the customer expectations was ratcheting up extremely high, and now all of a sudden, if I don't get my issue resolved in 1 contact, the dissatisfaction is really critical. And you can see how much, if you have 3 or more contacts it takes me to get my issue resolved, only 50%, just over 50% are going to be satisfied or very satisfied with the company as a whole. So one of the things that QA can really measure is how well are we resolving that issue. Now let me give you another example. We had a client, and in 2017 we asked the callers, how courteous, how friendly were this company's employees, and we had 95.5% satisfied or very satisfied. But just 1 year later, that dropped down to 89.7%, and the percentage that was said that describes them very well, courteous, friendly advisors, went down to 66.8%. So we wanted to dig into that a little bit. So we followed up our strategic positioning analysis with what we call a user experience analysis, where we did kind of another survey of those customers. And here's what's fascinating. If you look over on the left side, you can see that 85.4% of customers were very or mostly satisfied with their experience. If you add the very satisfied here at 68.6, and those who just said that they were mostly satisfied at 16.8. Omnichannel is a big buzzword right now in the industry, providing customers with all sorts of different channels. So we even dug into a little bit to look at satisfaction by the channel the customers use. And here's where we found something very interesting. Those who contacted the company by phone 89.2% satisfied or very satisfied with the experience. That drops to 75.7% if they contacted the company by email. There were only 8 people that used the chat. Wasn't very popular with that particular customer base. They were all satisfied. So this drop in the number of people said that they were satisfied with the company having courteous, friendly employees really focused in on the email side. So one of the things that we've learned over time is that email and phone, you can measure quality basically the same way. You have a list of criteria that you're looking for, and then you apply that as you look through the communication, whether you're listening to a recording or looking at an email. One more slide that I'd like to show you here. So we took the same group. These are, if you look at this quadrant map, let me explain this real quickly. So along the horizontal axis here, you can see, if you can see it, is 100% satisfied, very satisfied over here. And all the way on the left side, that's down to 76% satisfied or very satisfied. So wherever these little dimensions of service are, if you just kind of go down, so courtesy and friendliness on the phone for this particular company, customers were 96% satisfied or very satisfied. But when you look at courtesy and friendliness for email, so here's my email courtesy and friendliness, that went all the way down to 86. Now on the vertical axis here, we were able, the research folks at Intelligentix were able to do a regression analysis and figure out how important each of these dimensions of service are in really pushing that overall satisfaction with the company and driving a customer satisfaction. So the higher the dot is on the quadrant map, the more important it is to customers. So we look at this quadrant over here. This is where customers are less satisfied because it's on the left side of the quadrant map, but these are all very important to driving their overall satisfaction. And if you'll notice, 4 of the 5 dimensions of service here are email. The most important, the highest on the map, resolving my question through an email. Also, again, courtesy and friendliness, which we saw a drop in the description of their employees as courteous and friendly. That's all being driven by email in particular. The reason that this research is so important is because now all of a sudden you've got a blueprint. We know where we need to invest our time, energy, and resources digging into the things that we know are not satisfying our customers. So that's where the Intelligentix QA team picked up. We sat down with our client and we talked about resolution and how are we going to measure resolution. Again, this process is the same whether you're talking about phone calls or emails. So the first thing we said is, all right, what are the things that happen in a contact? In this case, we're looking at emails. Same thing could happen with phone calls. What are the things that go into that customer's perception of was my issue resolved and how well was it resolved? So over on the left side of the screen here, we came up with some behavioral elements, such as, was the answer correct that I got? Was the answer that I gave to the customer complete, concise? Was it clear? Did I answer all of the customer's questions that they posed to us? Was I listening actively to understand what it was that they were really wanting? Did I really understand the issue before I answered? So on and so forth. On the right side though, there's also things that QA can do, and what I find is that QA is often so focused on the agent behavior or the advisor behavior, we sometimes miss the opportunity to really dig into some of the systemic issues. When we know that in this particular case, our customers weren't happy with the resolution they were getting, especially through email. So there's a couple questions that we wanted our analysts at Intelligentix to list after they evaluated the contact. Was this an existing issue? So this might already be the 2nd or 3rd contact. How many contacts did the customer say, if they said it, that they had contacted? And in some cases, hey, this is the 3rd time I've contacted you, I haven't heard anything back. Was it resolved from the customer's point of view? If we put ourselves in the shoes of the customer, was this really resolved, or did we just kind of throw it over the wall to another department? Did the customer have to wait for us to get back to them? Did we have to tell the customer to call somebody else? Or if it's in a phone call, did we transfer them, or did we do it correctly? So these are all examples of different things that we can measure within that contact, and we know that this is directly linked to the thing that customers are saying is very important to them. So in our evaluation of this client's emails, a couple things that we found. Now, we evaluated a lot of things. I'm just going to show you a few of the behaviors. We found that for the most part, the agent seemed to be making a complete effort to at least get to the primary issue that the customer had emailed about. And when it came to the primary question, not bad, 86.5%. We felt like that was the answer was appropriate to the primary question. But look at what happened when we got to secondary questions. And in some emails, we found that there were not only one, but sometimes 2, 3, 4 specific questions that the customer asked in their email. And when it came to those secondary questions, that dropped out to 58.3%. We were finding that oftentimes the advisor was quickly answering the primary question and then completely ignoring the secondary questions that were clearly stated. Again, this can happen both in phone calls and in emails, but we're getting now to the root. Something's going on. We're not answering all of the caller's questions. And we found that only 53% of the emails that we evaluated were actually resolved from the customer's perspective. They were going to have to wait for information, provide more information, or it just wasn't resolved, and the customer was left with no recourse. For example, customer asked for pricing confirmation and delivery date. The CSR, the customer service representative, or the advisor, as you'd say in the UK, provided neither piece of information. Instead, they just put in a tracking number with a link. So now all of a sudden, we're basically saying to the customer, here, you find it out for yourself. You click on the tracking information and see if you can find it, rather than just saying, yep, the price was this, it's expected to arrive on this date, and here's the tracking. Customer asked for the status of an order that was supposed to arrive 3 days prior. This customer service representative simply stated, I don't have that in my system. Well, what's the customer supposed to do? There was nothing else. Well, you need to send in another PO, or let's dig into this, find out what happened. It was just, nope, we don't have it. Customer wanted to know when his or her order would ship and requested an invoice. Again, we provided a tracking number, didn't mention anything about the invoice. So all of a sudden, it became very clear why customers were upset. They're really getting a diminished level of service as the advisors were just quickly typing out in the most primary information and not really doing a lot, especially when it came to courtesy and friendliness. So let's use that as an example. We sat down with our client. Just as with resolution, we talked about what are some of the behavioral elements that customers perceive as being courteous and friendly, whether it's a phone call or an email. With emails, we thought, well, was there a friendly salutation? Did we address the customer by name? Because with emails, we always have their name, at least 99.9% of the time. Did we use a please or thank you when we were requesting something from the customer? Did we empathize, apologize if the customer stated that something had not met their expectations? And we know that if it's going to take another contact to get resolution, that satisfaction is going to be diminished. So let's look for hey, I'm sorry, but in order to resolve your issue, I'm going to need some more information from you. And then offering to assist with other or future issues. Now, as we analyzed, in this case, the emails, a couple things found out. Addressing the sender by name, pretty good, 77% of the time we did that, but that still is 23% of emails where we have the name, and we could have said, hey, good morning, John, good morning, Steve. Instead, we didn't use the name at all. There was no empathy on most calls, especially if we had to explain to them that we couldn't resolve their issue, or we didn't have that PO in the system, or we're going to need more information from them. Courtesy words, again, some opportunities for some improvement there. And offering to help with other future needs, again, it just wasn't there. It wasn't present at all in the emails. A couple of things that we were able to do then is to sit down with the agents and basically say, here's the way we want to structure these emails, and here are the important things that we need to make sure. And because we've done the research and we know what's driving satisfaction, we can reasonably conclude which of these elements are going to have the greatest impact on customer satisfaction. And so we were able to give them some sort of priorities for improvement. Now you'll notice there, I didn't mention anything about punctuation. If you'll notice in the middle of the of the chart, that was one of the priorities. It's fascinating. One of the things that we found in this company's particular emails is that their advisors were treating email almost like a text message, sometimes just a sentence, no capitalization, no punctuation. And what we find is that customers still think of email as sort of a professional communication, especially that initial email, looking for it to be courteous, professional, and kind of well laid out. So now we've got targets for improvement. We sat down with the company, we sat down with our agents, we train them on some of these specific things, and what's really cool is that as we go forward, we can now measure our improvement. Now, a lot of companies do post-call CSAT questions, and I know Derek and his team are going to talk about that. That's one of the things that ScoreBuddy does. The cool thing about this process is that if we know what's important, then we know what questions that we need to ask. Because we know that one contact resolution was so important, then maybe instead of asking that net promoter score question that everybody asks and nobody has any idea what to do with, we say, hey, were your issues today resolved to your satisfaction? Or how many contacts did it take to get your issue resolved? And if those customers say 3 or more, those are the situations that you really want to dive in and figure out systemically, why did it take that many and what can we do to improve that? Or because we know that courteous, friendly employees was the thing that had really dropped in this particular company's customers' minds, we might want to make the post-call survey say, hey, please rate the courtesy and friendliness of this agent on today's contact. And we know that all 3 of these questions are linked directly to things that are important to our customers. So hopefully that gives you a kind of a good idea of how do you use customer satisfaction to frame what the things that you're looking for in your contacts, and then following up with those customer satisfaction questions with your customers. Jonty, that's all I got.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Tom. Some great learning points there. I think some great questions. How courteous and friendly are our advisors? I think that's a great question. I think on email, it's quite interesting to note the lower satisfaction there. So there's a couple of questions I think around, did the caller ask more than one question if you're evaluating an agent, or did the advisor answer all the questions? So, and tie that back into your customer satisfaction survey. And perhaps the surprising one was the punctuation being important there. I guess that there's a danger that live chat you don't have to do punctuation on, but on email that's probably more important than a lot of people would give credit for.
That's what we've discovered across really every company that we worked with, is that customers still, at least in our culture today, expect a higher level of communication in email than they do in chat or a text. Now, maybe that will change as time goes on and more of millennials and generations Y and Z come into the workforce, but as of today, that's important.
Indeed. Well, we're going to jump across and we're going to try a quiz now. The address for the quiz, if you just want to perhaps pick it up on your phone, is www.kahoot.it. So if you go to www.kahoot.it, and I'll just get the slide up on the screen here. So if you just want to dial in, the PIN number is 965519. That's 965519. So if you just like to log in, we're getting a lot of people logging here. I'll just give you a moment to do that. So go to your mobile phone, go to kahoot.it and just type in the PIN number 965519. So we've got quite a number of people logging in there. So yeah, quite a big group of people dialing in. We've got about 120 people on the webinar. So here we go, and I'm just going to start it now. So we'll just get going on the quiz here. So the first question: true or false? Average handling time makes for a great agent target. So the answers in red is false, or blue is true. So if you just like to put the answer, average handling time makes for a great agent target. And we've got 50 people answered so far, so it's looking quite good. I think we've got everyone everyone in there. So let's have a look at the answer. The answer is false. 35 people got that right. And we've leader so far is Lauren. And the answer is false. AHD is a poor agent target. It's very good for doing Erlang calculation. It rushes people off the phone, cuts off caller, and decreases first contact resolution. So here's another quiz. In the Google UK searches, what is the most common search term? Do people use call center or do they use contact center in the UK? So just vote now. What's the most common search term? Call center or contact center? So just counting it down now. And the correct answer is contact center. So only 21 of you got that right. And let's have a look at the science behind that. We typed it into Google Trends, and in the UK, contact center makes up 57% of searches in the UK. So call center is becoming a rather obsolete term. So let's have a look. And in the USA, which one do you think is going to be? Is it going to follow the same trend of call center, of contact center as the UK, or do you think it's going to be different? So if you'd just like to vote on there, contact center or call center. So just vote on that now. And we'll have a look at, I think we've got everyone in now. So the answer, which most people have got right, is call center. That is by far the most dominant term in the USA. So quite an interesting difference there between the two countries. Right, let's have a look at some of the stuff to do with quality. Historically, the #1 driver of customer satisfaction calling in for customer service, is it one call resolution? Is it efficiency in handling my request? Is it quickness reaching an agent? Or is it courteous, friendly agent? So what do you think is the #1 driver of customer satisfaction historically for people calling customer service? So I think we've got everyone in there now. And the answer, yes, 33 of the audience have answered that correctly. It was one call resolution. If you were paying attention to the presentation at the beginning, you would have picked up on. So it's certainly a very important one. But that's changing now. We've now got Leslie at top of the scoreboard, and the answer to that is one call resolution, as we discussed. Okay, so here's the next question. Which of the following has been most rapidly increasing in importance among contact center callers in recent years? Is it omni-channel options of communication? Is it having access to a human agent? Is it timely response to service? Or is it receiving one call resolution? What's been rapidly increasing among importance in callers in recent years? So just like to vote on the answers there. Let's see if we've got everyone in. I think that's it. There we are. Well, 29% say omni-channel. Actually, only 5 people got it right, which is timely response to service. So quite interesting there. Speed, particularly in terms of digital channels, speed of response is very important. I think we often think that because it's digital, we can actually do it slower, but I think the approach is that speed's very important for that. Still got Leslie on top, but there is Sherry coming up the list quite quickly there, and speed to service certainly important. So let's have a look. True or false? Approximately 4% of the UK's working population are employed in contact centres. So the answers are true or false. Are 4% of the UK population employed in contact centres? The answer is true, according to a Contact Babel survey. Roughly 4% of the UK's population is employed in contact centres, and if you're actually based in the north of England or Scotland, it is significantly higher than that. Okay, last question we've got. How did customer satisfaction change in the most recent quarter? Did it decrease, did it increase, or has it stayed about the same? So how did customer satisfaction change in the most recent quarter? Did it decrease, increase, or did it stay about the same? And the answer, I think most of you got that right, it has decreased. And the winner of so far is Pippa, and it decreased in both the UK and in the USA. In the UK, it's had 4 consecutive quarters of decline, having peaked just over a year ago. Similarly, in the United States, it's had 2 consecutive quarters, again having peaked about a year ago. So that's all that we're going to do on the quiz there. So the winner was Pippa, 6,300 points, Sherry on 6,200, and Dennis on 5,200 points. So congratulations to Pippa. We'll be getting in touch with you as we go through. So let's just put the rest of it back, if I can get the screen up there. So, okay, so that's it was a little bit of fun. Okay, we're going to jump across to the chat room now, and we're going to have a look at some of the conversation that's coming through in the chat room. We asked a question earlier of the people why advisors loved the quality program, and here's a couple of more of the answers that came through who loved it. Ray said it's mostly based on the view of the customer plus compliance is why advisors love the quality program. Adette says we allow the agents to score themselves and score their colleagues. They're bought into the process. And T has said they like it because they can see everything live, can calibrate and validate all the phone falses. So Tom, that's quite an interesting approach. There seems to be a very strong element that if you want advisors to get bought in, they need to do the scoring themselves.
Yeah, and that's a technique that we actually use with our clients as well. When we sit down and do the one-on-one coaching, is we begin by just letting the agents score the calls themselves before we even say anything about it. What we have found is that agents or advisors are usually harder on themselves than we are as evaluators, and so by doing that, it kind of gives them buy-in and allows them to feel like they understand the process more.
Indeed, and calibration there, Derek, I think that you're going to be touching on that later is quite a key one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to that word trust and transparency. So, you know, involving agents either in the scoring process makes them very self-aware, both, you know, and again, the feedback we get is that agents are generally harsher scoring themselves than evaluators, which is interesting. And then involving them in the calibration process breeds trust in the system and in the process. So yeah, absolutely.
Agreed. So some great feedback there. Well, Susan sent through a tip and said it's important to create a culture in which quality is an extension of training and not a department trying to catch you in the act of doing something wrong. I love this one. That messaging needs to start on onboarding and throughout the cycle of training and one-to-one meetings. So Tom, I certainly think the climate of trying to catch people doing something wrong.
Yes, I think that's true, and you really want to make sure that the process is actually encouraging and empowering people. One of the things that this one's very interesting because I find a lot of contact centers will have this sort of period when a new employee comes on that they don't even evaluate or monitor them for a period of time. They kind of call it a nesting period. But our experience is that that's the wrong thing to do. You want to catch them immediately, make sure they're not developing bad habits, and help them to understand that this is just part of what we do from day one.
Yeah, I think that's a very good advice there. So Alex says, rather than having your advisors spending valuable time listening to the whole conversation to score it, get your QA time to timestamp the key parts they've heard that are the most important, positive or negative, to help make things a little more efficient. This also enables the option to build a library of key moments to share with other agents as a coaching library tool. I like that idea of a library, Derek. I remember one organization went into had a system called Champagne Moments, where there was they would get good bits of calls and then they'd share those with the rest of the team.
Yeah, I mean, look, we genuinely see this. It needs to be a benign environment. As much as I take Tom's point about, you know, engendering understanding of the process and consistency, it should be a supportive exercise for the agent. And so identifying positive events and extraordinary sort of performance, and rewarding that is really important. We have something called Kudos. It's a simple idea, but it's just recognizing, you did something really well today,
So Mike's come up with an interesting tip here called go to a scoreless form that's built around the coaching process. I don't know if that's using analytics or whether it's just a conversation framework rather than a score. I'd be interested in Mike if you've got some extra details on that. And Mike has also said 360-degree quality. Introduce yourself and set expectations during onboarding. Include agents in calibrations. Let agents self-score. Perform the coaching process as often as possible, setting goals for improvement. Follow up the evaluations to check process. I think, Tom, that was very much in line with what you suggested there. And we've got a question in from Ajiro here who says, how do you best conduct the team calibrations? Do you have that with the advisors present, or is it between the scorers? I don't know if you've got any advice on that one, Derek.
Well, we've seen a mix. We've seen the evaluators in a room together, and they're sort of making sure that they're understanding the criteria and scoring them consistently. So you'll see evaluators cross-scoring each other's results. But we have seen scenarios where they bring the advisors together and review it in a very open way. And both work. It depends on the philosophy of the organization, to be honest. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, we've got a couple of opinions that have come through before we jump across to Derek. Odetta said, where the customer has to go through an entire value chain to be assisted, instead of measuring per call, we need to measure the entire journey to see what is the entire experience from the customer. I think, Tom, you talked about that, and Derek, I know you're going to be talking about the need to join up customer satisfaction with the quality scoring process, so we won't touch on that because I think Derek's going to touch on that in a minute. And Andrew said the coaching needs to be linked back to the expectations that are laid out in the quality framework. For me, even though I don't have it where I'm currently, quality needs to be the tool that helps to drive other business KPIs. When this can be shown to the business, it's easier to get management buy-in. So, Tom, what sort of things have you found as necessary in getting buy-in?
One of the things that I find most common is that all I have to do is point to the plaque that's sitting on, or the placard that's sitting on the wall inside the contact center with the core value or the mission statement that says we're going to provide exceptional customer service, and then begin talking about, well, what does that mean? And was this contact, or was what we're measuring really exceptional, or are we just trying to be good enough?
Indeed, yeah, I think tying it back to core values is certainly very important on that. Well, Derek, probably a good time now to jump across to your thoughts, and I know you're going to be talking about building customer satisfaction into the whole quality process as well. Yeah, and
we'll touch off that conversation around visibility within the rest of the organization as well, because I think that's a really important point to get an understanding and buy-in from the rest of the organization into the QA process. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do is look at how we can perhaps give you some ideas and insights into how you might improve your own customer experience and build that using QA as the underlying foundation process. But really, we feel that it's not just about measuring the individual performances of agents. It's about instrumenting your QA process, or it's all about the data, right? So you're investing a lot of time and energy in building a process to do this, and investing time in evaluating. Why not make that work for the business in a different way? We grew up in the technology ecosystem. Jonty, in his introduction, mentioned we worked many years together, many years ago, and we know this space, and we understand the subtleties and also the changes and trends. So let me just first address the gap between QA and CSAT and how you might look to bridge that gap with new approaches and tools. So if you think about NPS, I'm using NPS as a generic matrix here because many organizations use it, but you're interested in the propensity of the customer to recommend your organization after having an interaction experience with your team. And obviously the customer is looking at it through their eyes and their perspective. From a QA point of view, you're trying to consider that, but you're also looking at other internal issues which the customer has no visibility of. They don't care if your processes are broken or if underwriting isn't available or whatever it may be. So understanding root cause and getting some sort of alignment between your QA criteria that you set in your framework and what the customer is expecting, that's where the gap is between QA and NPS. So think about gathering the CSAT scores as close as you can after the event, review them, categorize as positive and negative, and then identify what customers believe are important to them in terms of an outcome. And then look back at your QA process, revise those weightings, and communicate that with your agents so that everybody understands what the new setting or the new goals are for behaviors or for process or for delivery. In our experience, many organizations say, look, it's too hard. You know, why are they not measuring CSAT? Marketing typically owns surveys. It may be hard to set up or perceived as hard to set up. No one here knows how to design a survey, so it's not a natural skill perhaps in the QA team. We haven't got the time, or I've got no budget. What I would say to you is it doesn't have to be hard. We have an environment within Scoreworthy where we can launch an invite immediately after a call, ask 3 killer questions. You know, how was the experience with the agent? How satisfied were you with the outcome? And would you recommend us? And it really is as simple as that. It's a 30-second survey, send it out by SMS or email. So that will give you the material and the ammunition then to have that conversation about how do I bridge that gap between my internal scoring, which is somewhat subjective, and my external scores being allocated from my customers, who are obviously being very subjective in terms of their own needs. So what I thought I'd do now is just share with you what some of our Scoreworthy clients are measuring as we look across our user base. And really the QA focus depends on the business priorities, the sector that you're working in, and as Tom clearly pointed out, there are variations in terms of what constitutes good quality experience depending on the channel that the customer is communicating with you. And remember that the customer, back to that journey, the customer may touch off you through email and then through chat, and then they may be, need to go to the phone channel. So they may be using all channels. But a lot of what our customers are doing, we see a lot of more focus now around soft skills. And again, it's that active listening skills if you're in a call, or active reading skills if you're in an email, and understanding that there's actually more than one request coming through here in a single email. And did the agent build rapport and show understanding of the client? Again, that's a subjective, but I think good evaluators will understand what that looks like. And also being able to adapt and adjust to the mood of the call. So if you've got a complaint coming through and the agent tone is, let's say, terse or brisk, then it's only going to escalate the problem. So adjusting tone and pitch may be very important to managing a particular type of call. Summarizing a follow-up plan, so next steps, and was the agent professional at all times. Process. In some organizations, process is very important, and actually, to be honest, in most organizations. Following the correct processes means that either a delivery happens on time, that the correct delivery happens, that the customer essentially goes away happy. Did they terminate the call correctly? And again, back to Tom's point on emails, did we indicate that, look, if there's anything else you need, if there are next steps, here's what they should be. But just take note of the last one there on the list. Did the agent update the notes in the CRM case? I'll come back to that later on in the slides. If you're in a regulated industry, healthcare, insurance, finance, and even if you're in general retail, compliance is increasingly becoming a risk, right? So you have organizations and regulations and laws that may expose the company to financial risk in the event that there's a non-compliance event. So identifying who you're dealing with, identifying vulnerable customers, for instance, for companies who are offering credit and loans, that's a responsibility on them. Seeking permission to do certain things, in this case, a credit check. So compliance is, it doesn't necessarily have any direct outcome in terms of customer satisfaction, but it does have a risk factor as far as the organization is concerned. So it has to be treated differently. And finally, outcomes. So the outcomes can be measured in multiple ways, and one of your attendees there, John G, was talking about, you know, a non-numeric type of approach to presenting the information to the agent. So you can do it in percentage terms, or you can do it in cold numbers. You got 82%, you got 86%. You're below target, you're above target. But there are other ways of presenting the same information that may evoke a different behavior or a different reaction from your agent. I'll touch off that now next. One thing that I thought was interesting, we saw in one of our clients, one of our big clients, they evaluate calls, and one of the things they do is they assess the call from the point of view, well, if I was a customer, if I was this customer, would I be a detractor, passive, or a promoter in the event of an NPS survey? So it's like a proxy for doing a survey. It's an interesting way of trying to group your customer experience into NPS terms. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how you present information back to the agent, and we would absolutely encourage you to engage your agents at all levels of the QA process. So as you're iterating and changing and responding to changing needs and changing your QA framework, try and involve agents in that process. Give them some sort of editorial input so that they can react to what you think you're going to be asking them to do. And you'll get tremendous engagement from that. This is a traditional sort of presentation of numeric scores, and to be honest, 80% of our customer base would tend towards this approach. It's very factual, it's very numeric, it's empirical, and so in a lot of cases it makes it a relatively easy conversation to have with the agent. But there are other ways, and you know, you may want to present it in terms of banded thresholds, and it's not as hard and as abrasive perhaps as having a conversation about a percentage. So that's another way of presenting the same information. Or a success card, you know, where we're looking for met, not met. The degree of meeting or not meeting is less important. It's more about showing overall patterns. And you're not arguing about, well, if you gave me 1%, I would have been over target. You're looking at the broader behaviors. So that's a useful approach. Now, what I would emphasize and come back to the point I made earlier, if you're investing time and energy in gathering information, why not make it more valuable? So with a very small overhead, you can start actually categorizing, annotating, and tagging the information with the intention that you're going to do business analysis downstream. So you're still assessing the agent on an individual basis, but what you're doing is you're making that information, that result, much more valuable when you aggregate that and you start reporting on it. So it's no longer just about assessing the agents, it is about what drives or hinders your service quality. So you're looking for things like root causes of poor service, and that may not be an agent behavior or skill, it may indeed be a process. But you can start tagging up the information, so you can start adding metadata, custom objects, standard information, reference it back to the case, so you can go back to the case and look at root causes. So at either card level or a question level, if we had a bad result here, what was the underlying cause of that, so that I can actually take action and improve it. This is a slice of information from one of our very large customers, and they live by root cause analysis. And what they do is, and I'm going back to one of the scorecards, did they update the CRM notes? The biggest root cause of customer dissatisfaction or low scores in terms of QA for this client was actually left inadequate notes for the next person who is reacting to the customer. So once you know that, obviously you can coach that and you can start improving perhaps processes to improve that situation. So very quick summary on the takeaways. You can determine the focus of your QA, and it's down to you and your sector and your criteria, and whether you focus on soft skills, process, product knowledge, problem solving, compliance, or risk. Focus changes over time, businesses change over time, and Tom illustrated how customer expectation changes over time. So review, revise, reiterate, and again, involve your agents in that process. Linking QA effectively to CX outcomes helps alignment. So it helps you align your QA measurement with what the customer is expecting. And keep in mind, when you're playing back the results to your agents, how you do that is going to affect their engagement and how they feel about the information you're providing them with. Try and be positive, try and provide support. And then adding tags, categorizations delivers amazing insight and really points the direction in terms of positive change and ongoing change as you move through your processes. So that's us. I hope you found that some enlightening information in there. We're working with a lot of different organizations across a lot of different environments. So we're very happy to share that with you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Derek. Some great feedback there. Certainly think there is a gap between QA scores and customer satisfaction scores, and I think using software as a way to tie that together could be very good. Measurement soft skills, I think I love the question. Did the agent display active listening or active reading? I think ties in very well. And I think it's quite interesting, that bit about did the advisor set the right expectations, or did the advisor overpromise? Particularly in a sales center, that can be can cause big problems downstream. So if you'd like to get a demonstration of the Score Buddy system, I've seen it in use in a couple of organizations I've visited. Then just put it into the poll box there. So if you'd like to see a demonstration of that system, now is the time to do it, and Derek can arrange that for you. And we're just going to jump across to top tips and questions. And we've had a tip in from Liam, and Liam says offer some kind of self-scoring option, even if only for 1 or 2 contacts a month. The benefits are obvious. Agents can see how the process works. They can put themselves in the QA perspective and can begin to recognize the challenge QAing certain contacts may present. I think, Tom, that ties in quite nicely before, but this is quite an interesting way. Is even if your program does score people, just getting them to score 1 or 2 calls may help to see the whole picture.
Absolutely, and obviously the organization has to want to support that and allow their folks the time and off the phone to be able to do that. But doing it, Liam says, the results are obvious.
Indeed. So let's have a look at another tip. Lauren says, focus on effortless experience. First contact resolution is important. We look at making sure that one contact is effortless, being able to keep the client in a quick and effective way. I think that's a great one to score on. And Derek, I don't know if you've got any ideas on this. How do you conduct a calibration between the QA department? Do you see any particular effective way out there?
Well, there's really only one way to calibrate, and that's to review scores that have been recorded previously. So typically what would happen is you take a sample of scores which have previously been scored either by the evaluator or supervisors, and then you would blind score those again. And what you're doing is you're comparing a group understanding of what that score should look like, and you look for those variations. And you'd be amazed what that reveals. I mean, you've got different personalities scoring and different things going on in people's lives, and or misunderstandings about what the priorities are in terms of what we're trying to score. So getting common understanding by debate and discussion and comparing and contrasting is the best way to do that. And there are tools to help you do that, obviously.
Yeah, and certainly I think that the blind scoring is quite an interesting way of doing that, and also scoring the ones that you've previously calibrated and scored, because that keeps the whole calibration approach rather than changing it through. Susan says, here's a tip: build incentives around quality on a monthly basis. Those with scores over a certain percentage, most improved, etc., can have their names entered into a draw for prizes and a year-end reward. Those struggling to receive additional enhancement training and focus on improve their scores. This allows us to identify gaps in training or where we need to focus our efforts on coaching. Tom, what's your views on quality incentives?
I think that I've seen it done in a lot of different ways, and it certainly does provide, again, we've talked earlier and heard people say that their process is all about the stick. Well, providing a carrot for people can be just as effective. I know that we had a client, John Deere, and they actually put up really expensive lawn tractor is sort of an ultimate prize that year. So if your quality scores were at a certain level, your name went into the hat each month, and then yeah, they were willing to put about an $8,000 lawn tractor up as a prize. But you don't have to go to that extravagance. It's amazing to me how just even a simple, simple little rewards of a gift card or tchotchkes of different kinds, people love it. It gives them something to shoot for, and you're going to find that some of your people are competitive. They want to achieve something.
Excellent, very good. Marco says also promote agent self-evaluation, set time to review and compare their results with yours. Provide immediate coaching, not consulting, when finding discrepancies during the one-on-ones. Set expectations for improvement and meet again within 30 days to measure the improvement. Recognize for the improvements made and continue to provide support on still finding issues. Derek, I think that's a great framework there.
Yeah, I mean, we worked with an outsourced partner, a BPO, and they introduced self-evaluation and self-scoring for the agents. And the word that struck me when they did their analysis was that the agents became very self-aware. So it's very different when a third party is scoring your activities and your behaviors. When you do it yourself, it's much more meaningful for some reason, right? So self-evaluation is a really valuable tool. We don't see it used as frequently as perhaps it should be. And Scorebody actually facilitates that within the software, but we're just not seeing the uptake, but we would absolutely recommend it as a mechanism, yeah.
Well, that probably, I think, should be a key takeaway from today. Alex says, don't focus on spending money with rewards for QA. It can be hard to sustain and often misses the mark. Simple approaches like senior leaders saying, well done on that call, and encouraging messaging from the QA team can often have a very massive impact. Certainly, well done or thank you is quite a key one. Andrew says, here's an opinion. When can you show the financial benefits of quality, the business are happier to drive this and invest in it. So I'm not sure, Tom, how you tie the financial benefits of quality into the company.
Well, if you're doing ongoing measurement of customer satisfaction or the user experience, and you can begin to see the trend in higher levels of satisfaction, link that to retention, customer retention, and the life value of a customer, and you can actually begin to calculate ROI from that.
Indeed. So let's have a look at a couple more tips. Dennis says, for a quality program to be effective, it must be accepted by the people we're evaluating. It should certainly reflect service expectations, but should also be perceived as fair in order for the feedback to be accepted. You should spend the required time to make acceptability happen before you can use your QA program effectively. Fairness, Derek, that was, I think you said the fairness and transparency are key.
Yeah, absolutely. We genuinely, I don't think the stick approach works. It works for a period of time, but it becomes normalized and ineffective over time. Really encouragement, support, transparency, engagement, those are the key words.
And looks like Dennis is trying to win the prize. QA output should not only be a grade, but should also yield a detailed coaching plan, which reviews service expectations, achieves standards that need to be improvement, which leads to a two-way discussion on how to achieve the targeted improvement and provide opportunity for positive feedback on what is going well. So I think that's great. We've almost reached the top of the hour. So in one or two words, if you could drop into the chat room, what did you like best about the webinar? If you could also give us some feedback on the quiz, whether we should do another one next week would be good. Let's have a look at the winning tip. The winning tip comes in from Matthew 44, who says, invite colleagues from business areas that have nothing to do with the contact center or customer service to join the QA calibration sections. Brilliant. Those of us who work in the contact center know too much. Colleagues that have nothing to do with the contact center will view the process like customers who've not contacted the business before. I think that's an excellent idea, certainly one that's worth experimenting with. So when you feedback, when you leave the webinar, there's a quick survey, 4 questions long, that helps us build our own internal quality scores on whether we're doing things right or wrong. Would be great to do that. If you want to see the replay, share it with your management team, particularly if you're trying to get buy-in perhaps for agent self-scoring. That's going to be available in about an hour's time. callcenterhealth.com/recorded webinars. We're back next week looking at how to make your agents more productive. And just like to say thank you to our two speakers. Tom Vanderwell, thank you for joining us. And Derek Cochrane, thanks for calling in as well.
Yeah, great to be involved. Thanks, Jonty.
Okay, thanks everyone, and we'll see you all again next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.